I'm Harley Rouda from Orange County, California, and my wife and I are proud owners of electronic vehicles in a fully solar-powered home. And the question I have for any of you, California has recently passed legislation requiring all homes to have solar panels. And I'm curious as to what you think of the idea of that being a national standard. And while I recognize that California likely has more days of sunshine than many other states, I also recognize that North Carolina and New Jersey are leaders in implementation of solar power, solar panels on homes, and that economic incentives can help drive this. So I'll open it up to the panel for your response.
Well, thank you. So I'm not an expert in the solar energy, but my colleagues who are, the economists anyway, would argue that the more efficient way of providing solar energy for electricity is through centralized facilities. But I also have solar on my house, and I'm very proud and happy with it, and it works great for me. So I think it's part of the question of there's a certain tension there in terms of utility investments versus household investments. Certainly creating incentives to support those households that do it, I think, is a good idea.
If I could just follow up on that, it raises an issue that we really haven't talked about, which is the modernization of the electric grid itself. And I think regardless of exactly how you view the importance of rooftop solar versus centralized solar, we really need to modernize our electric grid. There are digital technologies that will allow it to be much more efficient, much more resilient, and will allow for net metering and other types of decentralized production.
I'm actually glad you went that direction, because that's one of the other topics I'd like to expand on. That is the decentralization of the grid and developing microgrids throughout the country. But we have seen some pushback by certain utilities across the U.S. who want to continue to be the primary generator of energy for their region. And haven't really accepted that paradigm shift that they need to move from a generator to more of the toll roads of electricity to serve the communities that they serve. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think you're correct. And state policy has typically been the driver that has led utilities to modernize their grids, open up to net metering. Most states allow net metering now, so that has become pretty standard. But I think this is where state policy has probably been more powerful than federal policy, just because of the role of the state PSCs.
And bringing it back to electric vehicles and the continued development and implementation of electric vehicles, one of the challenges that we face are the high-speed recharging stations, access to them, consistency in the standards, and frankly, even signage on the interstates. What would you like to see in those areas to help develop that infrastructure at a faster pace?
Yeah, I would comment that indeed, this growth of the growth of electric vehicles is inextricably connected with the grid. And it provides a tremendous opportunity as we go to more ephemeral sources of energy, solar and wind. The role of storage becomes hugely important. And electric vehicles can be a very big part of the solution in terms of the vehicle-to-grid type options.
Having federal support to fill the gaps, especially in more remote areas that are not as urban and clustered, would give people confidence and overcome some of the range anxiety issues. So that would be an early investment. And also maybe tying the use of funds to things like being able to use a charge card to pay. Because when I tried to take my Bolt up to a wedding in New Jersey, I noticed that different places I stopped had different services. And so it's not like going to an ATM where you can use another bank with your card. We should make it easier for people, and these are the kind of things that federal funding could be tied to, perhaps.
And then the last question I have is just on economic incentives in general. Historically, the economic incentives have not favored renewable energies to the same degree as other sources. And if we shift those economic incentives, or at least even take into account the long-term implications of the pollution that's created versus renewables, what in those toolboxes of economic incentives would you suggest would help push this forward?
Are you thinking electricity now?
Yes.
I mean, we're already at a point where wind is cheaper on a per kilowatt hour basis than coal or nuclear, and a lot of coal plants are having to shut down because they can't compete with wind. So we're moving very rapidly toward a world where wind and increasingly solar are going to be highly economic and just continue to take off.
Well, thank you for your time. I yield back.